3 years ago, God, I was asked by Nicky Morgan to investigate initial teacher training and how we could improve training in behaviour management for teachers who are entering the profession. Because my opinion is it's a bit of a mess. And the Carter report also recommended this, that maybe there was gaps and things we could improve. There is some terrific training in behaviour management from some institutions, both HE and school-based. This is not a general bashing, but the bashing is that the system itself isn't consistent enough. That it is very possible, like me, to become a teacher with next to no training in behaviour management, which is appalling. That I will stand in my soapbox till the stars burn cold. That is appalling for something that is one of the key things we do in classrooms, is running a room. I don't just mean telling kids off, although that too, but I mean running a room. You know, making the space a place that is optimised for their flourishing. You know, but behaviour management sounds a bit quicker to say. One of the things we learned from that report was that the biggest lever in behaviour in schools was the leadership. It came back to us time and time and time again. So, we were asked by the DfE to look into leadership and what leaders could do in schools to usefully create environments where behaviour was good. And I think perhaps the simplest thing I could possibly do was we just went to lots of schools that were really good at it. You know, we just asked lots of great leaders what they thought they did. And that's an interesting point, because a lot of them couldn't verbalise what it was they actually did. Just a quick question here. Hands up if you are a school leader or manager of some kind. Many. Governor, absolutely counts. Yes, well, given that you employ the head teacher, I'm going to say yes, you're high up there. School classroom teacher, classroom practitioner, or other school practitioner. Okay, so that's about 50-50, or maybe 60-40. That's pretty good. This session will be about a little bit about both. Because one of the key things we found was that the principles that guide good classroom management are very similar to the principles that appear to guide good school management at a structural level. Because we have two problems, as I mentioned already. Number one is that the teacher training is often fairly poor in classroom management. It has been sidelined for many, many years. When I started teaching, and weirdly enough, there's a teacher here, Shelley, who was in one of my very first placement schools. So please don't share any stories about how dreadful it was. But can I just say, this was a challenging school. It is no more. That's how challenging it was. After I left, they closed it. That's because. And they tore, you know, the kids tore me apart. It was a terrible experience for me as a teacher, and I didn't know what to do. And despite, you know, ample support from within the school, it was a very difficult experience for me because I had a 45-minute lecture on behaviour management. 45 minutes, and then good luck for your career. For something that is crucial to what we do, school leaders have it even worse. Because there is no formal training for school leaders in behaviour management at a structural level. So you can be a good classroom teacher. You know, you might know how to run a room, but do you know how to run a series, a succession of rooms? Do you know how to run a classroom and a corridor and a playground and a school trip and a church visit and so on? How do you manage that circumstance? Because weirdly enough, my previous career to this one, some of you know, I used to run nightclubs in Soho, in London, you know, a natural progression into teaching, religious studies. But one of the things that you had to do when you're running a club, especially a busy club, a capacity club, was to make sure people didn't, well, let's be honest, didn't die. That was fairly high on my priorities. I remember one night we had the fire exits chained shut till 3 o'clock in the morning. We just realised at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, stuff like that's really important. I just realised how competent I now sound. But the idea of managing people's behaviour seemed very opposite then. So, we came up with this report. We called it Creating a Culture. It was written for people in schools. It was deliberately designed not to be a government circular, you know, which could be dropped and disposed of. It was meant to be something that, I mean, I've been writing for many, many years now for teacher publications and books and so on, and I wanted to try and make it accessible, intelligible, but also to speak classroom, to speak the language of teacher, as it were. Otherwise, why write it? If you just want to have something to look nice on a website, that's fine, but it's not going to make an impact. So we wrote this, very accessible, diagrams. The lovely Oliver Caviglioli did the diagrams for me, and we went to lots of schools, we did structured interviews, we did an academic review, we spoke to academics, we spoke mostly to school leaders, but also governors, teachers, pupils, and so on. We try to make this as evidence-informed as possible. This is not hard science. This is not hard science. Dylan William, one of the legends of education research, he said at ResearchED Washington a couple of years ago, he said, nothing works everywhere, everything works somewhere. I think that's one of the most important things, one of the most important cautions for us to remember as people involved in evidence in education. Be very, very wary of universal pronouncements. You must do this and then this will happen. You know, it's not like boiling water. You apply heat and it will be good. Schools are complex systems because people are complex. Relationships are complex. But what we can look for are best bets, most probable, most likely. What tends to work in what circumstances? Because the strapline of ResearchED is working out what works. And people often say, rather meanly I think, you know, oh, it's not as simple as that. Well, I know it's not as simple as that. What we mean is what works and when, and in what context. When doesn't it work? That's a key question too. So when I was looking for things that schools did that worked in behaviour, we were looking for best bets, but we were also looking for when doesn't this work. And here are the headline conclusions. They were, I mean, if I asked any teacher or school leader to sit down for 2 minutes and say, what do you think a good school system / classroom system needs for behaviour? I'd be very surprised if you didn't come up with some of these things, like consistency and high expectations. You know, these words are very commonly bandied about in education. You know, that's not news. And unsurprisingly, almost every single head teacher or leader I spoke to said these things. One of the questions I thought was really interesting is, okay, well, if we all know it, then what's the obstacle? Why is that not happening? And one of the, I mean, my degree was philosophy, and one of the things that's really important in philosophy is defining your terms. One of the things I've realised over the years is that the education is full of what we call weasel words. Words that could mean lots of things, but are still the same word. Like the word punctuality. What does punctual mean to you? Because I know when I worked in restaurants and so on, you know, to be early was to be on time. 5 minutes early was on time. Yeah? I hate that phrase. Other people, being on time means being there on the beat of the bell. And some of you have probably taught students who think that on time means, well, you haven't finished the starter yet, so it's okay, I'm here. You should be lucky to have me. You know, punctual means lots of things, especially to teenagers. So, define what punctual means. Define what high expectations means. You have to calibrate those kind of things. If I were to say to every single teacher, define your teaching style, I think 99% of teachers would say, I'm tough, but I'm fair. You know? I've got lots of red lines, but they can always approach me. Right? And school leaders do the same kind of thing. So, we can't all be like that. So what gives? I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. So we found universal themes, but what I was delighted to see was that those themes were often very contextual. So what high expectations looks like in a special needs primary school is very, very different from what high expectations might look like in the sixth form of Eton or something like that. And that's okay, because different context absolutely matters. And picking out that nuance, picking out that context was very, very important. Right? But overall, the most important strategy, the thing that every one of them seemed to talk about, was the fact that you had to get in front of the behaviour. You had to get in front of the behaviour. You couldn't just wait for it to happen and then react to it when it went wrong, if that makes sense. It's something I see in the classroom as well. A lot of teachers just go in, and because they're not being trained, I don't blame them, they haven't been trained, they go into the classroom and they just try to teach. And then when kids misbehave, they then respond to that. Right? That, I need to give that a name so I can sell it, but that is the model, the Tome Bennett model of failure. Because it really was my model, I assure you, years and years like that. That is what most of us do, and most leaders do too. Because many leaders sometimes take their roles, not having had much training, don't blame them, and think to themselves, right, I should be leading a school, what does that mean? What do I do? We're all in the same boat. So what does it mean to get in front of behaviour? Sorry, it's such a huge screen, I need to kind of walk to you just to read it there. There are two approaches that leaders and classroom teachers have told me are the most effective. Number one is to create a whole school culture with a consistent approach which draws pupils and staff towards it. I'll explain why that's important in a minute. And you could argue that's a kind of a proactive approach. I'm going to question that because I'll come back to that. That's something you do before things go wrong, as it were. But it's not just stopping things from going wrong, it's also encouraging things to go right. And that's an angle that we very frequently don't think about much in classrooms or in school level. How can I make sure things go right as opposed to just not break? I always use the analogy of pots on a stove. If you had your dinner cooking away with four pots on the stove bubbling away, you wouldn't walk away thinking, oh, I can go to the shops now because that's fine. You would imagine that might go wrong at some point. But in teaching, we just walk away from the stoves. Well, everything's okay just now, it probably won't break ever, which isn't a great look. The second way you can do it is that you can build behaviour structures in school, and I mean things like formal structures, where you teach teachers and staff to respond to behaviour in a way that then amends the behaviour. I mean, this is something that all teachers need to learn as well as school leaders. What do you do when kids misbehave? What do you do when kids behave? And how do you then use that as a teachable moment so they can learn to do it more in the future? Now, I apologise to any sociologists in the room. I'm going to mangle the use of the word culture. Culture to me simply means the beliefs and values of a community. That's what a culture is. And behaviour is what they do as a result of that. I'd like to broaden the concept of behaviour here. Behaviour, I simply mean anything that somebody does physically in a school. When we talk about behaviour in schools, we very frequently think about misbehaviour. We very frequently think about chucking chairs and running away, calling Mr. Bennett a vegetable or whatever, which was quite frequent in the early days. But behaviour is everything they do. It's how they debate, it's how they walk, how they conduct themselves, and how they come into school and what equipment they get out, anything like that. So behaviour stems from your culture, your beliefs, your values and so on. Because before you do just about anything, there's a prior mental event happening before that. So you have to get into that part. Because you can't, wrestle them into teaching. You can't literally move their arms and legs. Not yet, we'll get there eventually. Behaviour is culture demonstrated, and school leaders, in order to get in front of the culture, need to design that behaviour. They need to be, the phrase we used a lot in the report was, need to be the conscious architect of school culture. You cannot just allow the culture to happen at school. You have to make the weather, as I'm sure you've heard that phrase before, but leaders do make the weather. And even if you do nothing, there will be a culture. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, which culture do you want? And we don't do that enough. And the schools I went to that were doing brilliantly did this a lot. And we went to lots of different types of schools. We went to rural, urban, coastal, north, south, east, west. We went to PRUs, primaries, secondaries and so on. We spoke to a lot of people, and we didn't go to schools that were doing well because of good fortune. We didn't go to leafy schools in the Cotswolds where the children were all the sons and daughters of diplomats, with bags of social capital and fantastic vocabularies and loads of self-regulation. We went to schools that were in challenging socio-economic demographics and asked them, what do you do? And this is what, boiling it down, this is what they did, which is why we called the report Creating a Culture. And those three things, those three stages, it's not rocket science, but it's not often done enough, and this is the emphasis we need to unpack. You need to understand what culture you want and design it. Literally sit down and ask yourself, what does good behaviour mean in the dinner queue? What does good behaviour mean transitioning between one activity to the other? Seriously, what does that look like? Where are they? What are they doing? It's not enough just to have these vague, anodyne aphorisms, these woolly ideas, in this school everyone will flourish. We will all do our best. Lots of schools have got vision statements like that. The problem is, that's a goal. That's not a strategy. I used to teach lots of children who very fervently believed that after school, in fact, back to Abbey Wood again, sorry. The two things they wanted to do after school were either maybe work in Asda, or international rapper. And that was the extremes. There was very little in between. And I'm okay with the aspiration to be an international rapper. You go, girl. But they need to know how to get there. And just saying, be yourself and believe in your dreams, isn't enough. And yet that's the behaviour strategy that many schools have. Just be yourself and believe in your dreams. That's the plot to a Disney film. That's not what we do in schools. You've got to get concrete. Charlie Taylor, one of the previous government behaviour advisors, I don't know what happened to him. I think they just moved him on somewhere. We're like Doctor Who, we just regenerate. I'm thinking of an angry Scottish one. He said that this is the thing where schools fall down at most of all. So you design that culture, and then you build the culture, you tell people, you communicate to people what the culture is that you want. Yes, it's that simple, but it's not that simple because we do it badly. Very frequently, it's something on a wall. Very frequently, it's an email. Very frequently, it's, they'll pick it up as they go along. Yeah, they'll pick up bad habits as they go along. Good luck to them picking up great habits. That's like putting someone in a room with lots of pianos and saying, oh, they'll probably learn piano somehow. Have you ever read the book Tarzan? Tarzan, if you remember, kind of is raised in the wild. And at one point he comes across the hut that his parents built before they died. And he finds all these picture books with, balls and A, B, C and cats. So he teaches himself English. Now, there may be some language experts in this room. I don't know how far he could have got with that, if I'm honest. His internal language. But he certainly couldn't speak it. Thank God they got that bit right. Because, British accent. Teachers don't pick it up as they go along. They do, but they pick up lots of bad stuff too. We can do better than that. We can consciously, in a structured way, teach leaders and teachers how to do this. This is stuff which is learnable. The Baroness there was talking about the fact that we need to try and avoid just relying on super heads and super teachers and so on. That's right. Yeah, some people are very good at interpersonal relationships. I was quite good at talking to people and calming people down, working in clubs and so on. But I didn't know how to structurally run a room, so I floundered for years. And the lovely phrase is, "You make the weather." Leadership is the biggest leverage, or the biggest lever in the culture. If you're a classroom teacher, that's you. Because I also see classroom teachers as classroom leaders to some extent. And here were some headlines. You can create a culture. You can help to do. You can do things which make a culture. You must consciously decide that. You must reinforce it. And there are at least two subcultures in the school: the staff culture and the student culture. If you don't get the staff culture right, the student culture will not follow. You're just hoping that they will do okay by themselves. That's a big hope. That's a big if. There needs to be consistency in the staff body. There needs to be a consistency of value. I'll tell you something which really surprised me that a lot of head teachers said. They very often said that they would rather hire somebody with less skills, more inexperienced, not such a great teacher, but who shared their values, their school values, rather than the other way about. Obviously, they prefer both. But the view was, and it's a view I endorsed, that teaching is a learnable set of micro skills. But the value thing, agreeing with what the school is trying to achieve, that's a much harder thing to achieve in somebody. So I understand from an employer's point of view what they're talking about, because what they're looking for is to try and create consistency of culture in the staff subculture, and that is terribly important. You cannot have half the teachers doing one thing and half the teachers doing another. Which doesn't mean that the teachers all have to be robots and copy one another like clones. It just means that they all have to do the same things that are important. And the school leadership, and the teachers to some extent, have to decide as a community what are the important things we will all do the same. This is not about clone teachers. This is very much about what are our steel poles, what are the things that are going to make this culture happen. And it might be a mobile phone policy. It might be what side of the corridor you walk on. It might be having a uniform or not having a uniform. It might be how you pray. It might be how you sit in a assembly. It doesn't matter to me. The beauty of my lovely role is that I got to see so many schools that did it so differently and yet achieved great results. And that was quite nice to see, that you didn't just have to do it one way, which is why I'm happy not to sell the Tome Bennett method, because there isn't one, because there's lots of different ways of doing it. But the important thing was, the themes were making sure you build that culture, and you do so as a way to draw kids in. Culture is conveyed by demonstration. Far too many schools just say what they want you to do and then back off. It's not going to be good enough. And observed culture is more powerful. And how you build culture? Routines. There's two ways of doing this. Social norms. Social norms are incredibly powerful. Human beings are very, very social animals. And we know from psychology that we very much pick up the cues of our behaviour from other people round about us. So one of the reasons why you're behaving the way you're behaving just now is because everyone else is. And you pick up the cues from other people. If everyone suddenly started to run out of the room, chances are you might do it too, because, why take the risk? And I think this is very much ingrained in us, that, it's a survival instinct too. It's safer to do what other people are doing because they probably know what they're doing. That's why sometimes everyone gets on the wrong train. Have you ever seen, oh God, there's a terrible black box recording from some plane that crashed. Did you hear this one? Where the co-pilot keeps saying, oh, there appears to be a warning light going. And the pilot's saying, no, it's fine, don't worry about it. The co-pilot says, yeah, that's a really serious warning light. And then the pilot says, no, I'm sure it's fine, don't worry about it. And you can hear in the co-pilot's voice, no, this is really serious. But he takes his cue from the authority, and he falls in. And sadly the plane crashes. And one of the places you see this most frequently is when the fire alarm goes off. What do you do when a fire alarm goes off when you're teaching a class? The kids look at you, and you look at the kids. And everybody asks this question, everyone goes, is that a real fire alarm? Like everyone's experiencing a mass hallucination. It gets better. The teacher then leans out the classroom and looks next door. And there's other teachers leaning out along the corridor. Taking the cues from one another, and eventually do what everyone does. We'll wait until somebody tells us if it's a real fire alarm or not. Fire alarms are meant to be taken seriously all the time. That's why you have them. But we're taking meanwhile the building burns down, which is great. I once worked in a restaurant, a TGM Fridays, of course, where there was a kitchen fire, which was very, very impressive, but very scary. The smoke was filling the restaurant from the ceiling down, and so all the customers, very British, were sitting there having their dinner looking up at the smoke. There appears to be a ceiling made of smoke, darling. And they were all still staying there, just eating their dinners, waiting for somebody with a badge on to say it's time to leave. And we finally started to usher people out. And of course, people were taking their dinners with them. This was, of course, Glasgow. And I'm keeping this, I put them down. Don't lose that, waste of food. And there was a manager stopping them saying, well, you must pay your bill before you leave. Kitchen on fire. He was sacked. The power of social norms. We take our cues from these norms. And there's many reasons why we do. It's probably kind of a survival thing. If you, as a school leader or a classroom teacher, can establish some form of norm, then people will gravitate towards it. Have you ever had a situation where you've got a very well-behaved class, and then some head of phase or head of year says, here, have the naughtiest people in the whole school, and drop them in there, and you're thinking, oh, fantastic, what a great opportunity to help this child. And it is. But at the same time, you're thinking, oh, it's going so well. But there is a good reason for that, because you're hoping that child gravitates towards the social norms of that group. Of course, you know what happens sometimes. If that child's norms are so ingrained, then sometimes it can go the other way. You gaze at the abyss, and the abyss gazes back. Lie with dragons, become a dragon. There's a danger here. So routines are the way in which good leaders and classroom teachers build this culture. Very simply, you identify the things, the behaviour you want to see, you identify the things you want to happen the same way all the time. I'm going to suggest that 90% of what we do in schools should be a routine. How do they come into the classroom? There should be a way in which they enter the classroom. Do they just start their work? Do they go for the bean bags? Do they write, do they get their name tag from the wall? Do they hand out whatever? What's the routine for that? How do they leave a classroom? How do they enter school, leave school? This is crucial, how do they transition from one activity to the next? How much time do you waste getting them from one activity to the next? Sometimes it's just turning round. And if everyone turned round 5 minutes later, there's 3 people still waiting. There should be a routine for that. But more than just that. How they plan an essay, how they handle an unfamiliar social circumstance, how they greet an unfamiliar adult who enters the room. That's a great one too. That kind of thing. These should all be routines. Most of what we do is routines. Now, you won't see that in the teacher movies. You won't see that in Dead Poets Society, because it's not very sexy or glamorous. You won't see that on Educating the Yorkshire or whatever, where the narrative is usually, broken child is healed by love. That's the story over 6 weeks, which is fine, and it's inspirational, and it is part of what we do. But 90% of what we do isn't that. Children do not leap regularly on desks shouting, "Captain, my captain." The number of teachers I know that got to teaching because of that bloody film, and are so disappointed with life. Where are these children leaping? I mean, they leap on desks, all right. Well, they're not shouting poetry at me. So you create these routines. And if you're a school leader, routines at assembly, blah, 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 you identify it, you tell them, and you don't just tell them, you practice it. There's a wonderful line from Douglas Moff. He says, you don't do something until you get it right. You do it until you can't get it wrong. That's the essence of a habit. Because when you practice something physically, it becomes a habit. You know, brushing your hair, brushing your teeth, the way you speak, your accent is a type of habit. You know, the way you walk to school, your morning ablutions, these are all habits. They're internal to you. They're portable. You try to do them wherever you go. And once somebody does something often enough and it becomes a habit, it becomes their character. Because what is character if not the propensity to act in a certain way depending on certain circumstances? So obviously at school we're teaching an academic curriculum, but we're also teaching a social curriculum. How do you behave? And not just in a how do you sit still and shut the hell up way. Although that too. But how do you flourish? What are the habits of excellence we're trying to help you achieve in order to be wonderful human beings and wonderful scholars? Which I'm going to suggest are the two main, our two main goals. Routines save time. By having the routines there, because we're social animals, because of norms, because of cues, we gravitate towards them. It doesn't mean everybody will do them, but it means you've got something to gravitate towards. If you don't set your stall out, if you don't create that culture, you've given them nothing towards which they can gravitate. They will construct their own culture. And if you're expecting it to be a wonderful culture of aspiration, ambition, and high standards and excellence and dedication and perseverance, then you're probably teaching the Von Trapp family. Right? And incidentally, what was the name of Julie Andrews' character in that film? Maria. Was it Maria? No. Maria was the girl, wasn't it? How do you solve a problem like Maria? Anyway, where was she? Her. You know her. She was called in to be a governess of those children because they were so unruly. Bloody hell, I wish I taught those kids. Anyway, provide social norms, frees up thinking space. Once something's become a habit, you don't have to think about it anymore. They're just doing it automatically. Routines become habit becomes character. These slides are available to you, so you're more than welcome to have you. Weirdly enough, I think routines liberate. People go, "Oh, that's so oppressive, you fascist. You fascist, that's what you get off on, telling kids what to do." No, but they need to be told what to do sometimes so they can be free to do other things. It is not oppression to teach children how not to simply act on their first impulse. That's not oppression, that's liberation. We call these first and second order desires, or first and second order motivations. I might pass a fridge and go, cake. Just eat it like a bear. But I know not to do that. So I'm acting on my second order desire. I don't want to want that. Bertrand Russell famously said, "We can do as we please, but can we please as we please?" And I always love that line. And I think that's true. That's liberation. Children say, "Can we have a free lesson?" They're all free. You're not paying for it. Oh, teacher who? But what they mean is, can we do what we want? But you know what? Kids don't really enjoy that after a while. It just becomes boring. They don't. What's the point of them coming to school in that regard? Incidentally, if you do read the report, and why not, it's free. And it's fascinating and it's hilarious. It's not hilarious. The DfE do not allow hilarity. The red line came out quite a lot. These were some of the key things that the leaders mentioned. And weirdly enough, it's very similar to what classroom teachers would mention too. It was the culture I really focused in on. And if you go to see a great school where behaviour is brilliant, despite challenging circumstances, you cannot leave without feeling inspired by it. And inspiration, incidentally, is a much overused word in education. People put it in their Twitter biographies. I am an inspirational speaker. Three noble truths. I apologise to any Buddhists in the room. Three noble truths here. What you permit, you promote. When teachers or leaders allow something, you're essentially saying it's okay. The thing about social norms is, this is very interesting, social norms, when something looks normal, weirdly enough, we start to approve of it. Not in that, oh, that's brilliant, but oh, that's okay, wait. So you might go to a school where there's lots of litter, and you go, oh, that's terrible. After 6 months, yeah, that's normal, it's okay. You may go to a school where the behaviour's really bad. After 3 months you think, yeah, I'm okay, I can just about get by. That's okay, that's the new normal. You've recalibrated. What you permit, you promote. If you've got a head teacher who walks past a fight because they're worried the children won't respond to them, the head teacher has tacitly suggested that's okay. They've approved of it. Why would a staff member do anything about that? Well, there's lots of reasons, but you're encouraging them not to by doing so. And it's the same for teachers to students. If you act in an inconsistent or aggressive or belligerent way, pupils are going to think, well, fair enough, he's doing it, I will too. That logic doesn't exactly map, but it makes a lot of sense. Number two, don't do it till you do things until you can't get it wrong. You don't practice something once and get it right and go, that's it, I cracked it. You do something over and over and over again. Kind of a samurai code of teaching and leadership. And there's a lovely bit of wisdom there. Make checking your routine part of your routine. It's not enough just to say, all right, 9F, from now on, we're all going to take our hats off when we get into the classroom and put them on the third peg, to quote John Cleese. It's not enough just to say that once. You've got to say to yourself, right, in 6 weeks' time, I'm going to take stock. Is it happening? Why not? If not, I'm going to say something to the whole class. I'm going to maintain that routine. That's one of the ways in which whole-school routines break down. Because we forget to revisit them and we forget to remind children all the time. In fact, they should exist within a culture where it's constantly reminded. I've only got a few minutes left now. Yeah, I mentioned this. I talked before about the culture. The culture is a great way of getting in front of behaviour. Because what you're doing is you're setting up a norm, a social norm for them towards which they gravitate, and they do gravitate towards it. It's a huge help. In a sense, you're saying, here's how not to misbehave and here's how to behave really well. And that's great. But of course you will always have to respond to things going wrong, because things will go wrong, because we're human. And that's when these two things are really important. Number one, for a classroom teacher, you would have what I would call the invisible and the visible ladders of consequence. The visible ladder of consequence is just your school consequence system. If you throw a brick through a window, you will get a hug from the head teacher and a biscuit. And he'll say, there, it's okay. I understand your unmet need. But there's something which goes way before that, which is the invisible ladder of consequence. What do you do before it gets to that stage? And it's very simple stuff that good classroom teachers do all the time, but it's just very important for us to verbalise it and to unpack it. And it's things like, for example, there's 3 kids talking at the front of your class when they shouldn't be, so you walk a little bit closer to them. I'm terribly sorry, it's quite invasive, isn't it? And it feels awkward, you don't like it, please go away, I will stop talking, that's worth it. It could be something like tapping the desk. It could be something like, Doug and Mom's very good at this. It could be something like saying to a whole class, I'm just waiting for 3 tables now to start work. It's very non-invasive that you step up the invasiveness and you say, I'm just waiting for the yellow and the red table to start. And then you finally say, Billy, see me later. It's the non-informal ladder of consequence, which precedes the formal ladders of consequence. Good teachers are just good at this. Good leaders are good at this too. And secondly, your behaviour feedback. Everything you do should be a feedback on the student's behaviour. Everything we do as professionals. So if they're doing the right thing, your feedback is to do nothing. And then perhaps praise them later or encourage them or publicly reward them or something like that. If they're not doing the right thing, you should probably get stuck in. But there are lots and lots of reasons, there are lots and lots of things that our feedback can do for them. We can deter, inform, encourage, instruct, retrain, remind. There are lots of things we can. If a child is misbehaving because they can't read, then part of your response should be to teach them to read. That's your response. Unpacking the reasons for the behaviour and establishing if it's a serious reason or a trivial one is part of what we do. There's so much more that we found out from schools. I've only given you a whistle-stop tour around 2 or 3 of the concepts that we uncovered. But you know what? None of this is rocket science. And I'm delighted that it's not. I'm not here spreading the good news of this is really complicated and weird, but if you're good at it, you'll be good. The gospel I try and spread with this is very much, listen, this is what great teachers in schools are already doing. Here's a range of strategies you might want to try, which are best bets. Creating a culture for all the children works for all children. Really helps all children, whatever their needs are. Because children need safety, they need structure, they need support. And rules need to have exceptions. I've got to mention this. There are children for whom we will have to make exceptions. But exceptions should be exceptional, logical, and consistent and supportive. That doesn't mean rules are wrong, it just means that rules sometimes need exceptions. All rules do. You're not allowed to kill, normally, in society, but sometimes you are, or sometimes you're let off with it and understood why. Ladies and gentlemen, there's so much more to talk about when it comes to behaviour. I've remained utterly convinced and confirmed in myself that it is one of the key things in which you train not just teachers, but also leaders. If any of you teach in the South, incidentally, my God, I've got so much to look at here. That's okay. That was in case we had an extra hour. You can all read that, right? Fine, good. Get in touch with me, because in the South we can offer free training, which is funded by the DFE. Sadly, it's the South only. But yeah, do so if you want. I'm sorry I don't have time to chat, but it's been a pleasure to speak. Thank you for listening. Have a very good day.